So when you're checking the deck, building the deck joist, always check your joist to make sure the crown side is up. When you've got the crown side up, put your joist on, joist hanger, and put your edge piece on. Now never mount your hangers first, always mount your hangers with the wood so you can adjust the wood height to be even with your nailer board height all the way along, so that you don't end up with a lip here, just because the wood isn't always the exact same thickness. When installing, I like to hold it, and with the nail gun, of course, makes it a little bit easier, but by hand, set the nail to hold your joist hanger in place. Once it's holding your joist hanger, then you can put your first nail into the joist hanger itself. At the correct height. Then once you've got that, square it up. And continue on. All right, so when you put the joist on the end joist especially, and in some states you're going to need these hurricane clips on every joist, but you should attach the hurricane clips. So in order to secure the joist to the beam. Now you would want this on the inside, and put that in. All right, so when you put in your next joist, this is going to be the most critical one. The rest of your joist can go on the 12-inch or 16-inch spacing, even 24 in some circumstances. But the first joist, you're going to need to set it up so that the edge of the board sits flush where you want it to. So the edge board, you're going to want, maybe you want no overhang, therefore it would sit right flush with the edge. Maybe you want just a little bit of overhang. Maybe you've got some siding that you want to put here, and that siding is going to have some thickness. And to account for that thickness, you want this to stick out past the siding. So, for example, if you're using our fascia board, then you're going to want to take the thickness of the fascia into account as to how much overhang you have, so that this sits flush with the edge of the fascia, which, if you're using our fascia, actually works really well if you sit this point, this very edge point, with the very edge of this board. So basically you want it to sit just like that. This way it'll cover over our fascia product and give you a nice clean finish. Now therefore, if this is what our gap, if this is our spacing that we want, then we want our joist to sit halfway on this one. So we're going to support the edge of the next boards going along, as well as we're going to support the edge of this board. So it's going to sit halfway on there, which, simply enough, you just take a mark, line up your edge board where you want it, and then make a mark exactly where you want the center of your joist to sit. Now you have the mark where you want this joist to sit, and then from this joist there on would be, here I've got 12-inch joist spacing. You might also go 16-inch joist spacing. All right, so when you're building a Tanzite deck, you're basically just building a wood structure like any other. Same 16-inch joist spacing is fine. 12-inch joist spacing would be recommended for commercial or heavier duty applications. In the deck here, I've got 12-inch joist spacing. Now, when you're building the deck, if you don't already have a nailer board on the house, you're going to want to install one. Always check your local building code as to how this nailer board is going to get fastened. I like using these conceal locks. You can use lag bolts, but you're going to want to make sure that this is very secure, since that's going to be taking the weight of the entire deck, and your local building code will have specifications as to how this needs to be attached. Normally I use these guys. They work quick and simple to attach the nailer board to the house. Now you're also going to need to waterproof this edge. Now you can waterproof this with a piece of flashing, or a aluminum flashing works well. You can also use tape. I like, that's usually my preference, is to use a waterproofing tape, which is just going to protect the top edge of this nailer board, as well as run up the house, you know, at least a couple of inches. In states where you don't have a lot of snow, in states where you do have snow, you want to go at least 4 inches up the wall. Canada, you probably want to go more like 5 or 6 inches up the wall. Now, when you hang these joists, always use something that goes under the joist. So I've got joist hangers here. These joist hangers go around underneath and hold the weight of the wood so that you can engage the entire strength of the whole 8 inches, 10 inches, 12, whatever you're using for joist hangers. Because this sits under, if you simply nail it in from the side, the wood could crack or split, which is going to lose strength. Whereas if you're under the joist, then you're going to engage the full strength of the joist, even if it does split. If you don't want to use the joist hangers, you can also perhaps use a 2x6, run it underneath, and now you're still holding the weight from under the joist, engaging the full strength of the joist. For the foundation of your deck, you have the nailer board against the house. The other side is going to be sitting on some kind of a foundation. These could be pier blocks, which pier blocks sit on the ground, and they will move a bit. The Tanzite stone is fortunately flexible enough to handle that movement, so no problem there. However, that may not be allowed by your building code, so definitely check that. They may have regulation as to what you need for piles. Screw piles often work great. Steel screw piles screw into the ground, or concrete piles. Once you have your pile set, you're going to need to put a post on that. Normally I would suggest a 6x6 post, or what I like to use is a tripled up 2x8. The triple 2x8 tends to stay a little straighter because it doesn't twist or curve like a 6x6 could. You may also be able to use a 4x4 or a 4x6, but that may not be allowed by all building codes. Then a beam. So some building codes may allow you to use a double beam. I usually like to use a triple beam. I'd rather have a triple 2x6 than a double 2x8, for example. But a triple beam will sit on top of the post, so you use a triple, for general sake, I like a triple 2x8 with a triple 2x10 beam. Your joists are going to sit on top of the beam. in most circumstances, and this is the preferred way since the weight of the joist sits fully on top of the beam. Now that may not be, you may not be able to if the height of the deck is too low or there's something in the way here preventing you to put this underneath, in which case you can put the beam at the end. That works great. However, you're going to want to put a joist hanger here so that, again, the weight is carried from under the joist. So if you're going to put the beam at the end, use joist hangers. If you put the beam underneath, you don't need joist hangers. However, you may still need to use a hurricane clip. Hurricane clips, they simply prevent uplift of the deck so that your joists don't move around. They also don't lift up, particularly important in tornado or hurricane type weather. Now this is a hurricane clip rated clip that simply sits on there like that, and this will hold any deck down, no problem. Also commonly used are these guys, and they simply sit like this. Again, in hurricane country, this may not fit your code, so you might want to check that. You might need to use these, but in most places, these clips are going to be fine for what we need them to do. Now, your joist spacing, I have 12-inch on center. You can go 16-inch on center, but this first, well, technically your second joist, your first one in from your rim joist, you may want to consider where your railing sits. You might be able to adjust this so your bolts for your railing go right down into this. But you're also going to want to consider the edge board and your overhang on the deck. So if you have a fascia board that's say 1 inch thick, then you're going to want at least a 1 inch overhang on your edge board. If it's 1/2 inch thick, then you're going to want a 1/2 inch overhang on your edge board. So consider your fascia thickness before placing your edge board, which is going to determine where your second joist sits, so that your board sits halfway on this joist and the boards coming into it also sit halfway on this joist. Now, the type of wood you use, here I don't have treated wood, which works great for a lot of areas. However, probably most states you're going to want to use pressure treated wood just to protect it from the elements a little more, give it a longer life, especially since you're building a deck out of stone. The stone's going to last almost forever. The deck may as well too. I would also suggest protecting the top of these joists. I like using a joist tape. The joist tape simply sits over top, protecting the top edge of the deck from moisture. This stuff is actually fairly flexible, so as you screw into it, this basically self-seals around the screw, protecting this top edge of the joist, giving it a longer life. When installing the joists, every 6 feet, put it in a row of bridging. So if you have a 6-foot deck, put one in about the middle and simply run those all the way through. This is just going to keep your wood straighter and keep the joist from twisting. If you have a 6-foot or wider deck, go at least 1 row of bridging. Once you get to 12 feet, I would suggest a double row of bridging, just to keep the structural integrity of the joists and to keep them straight, which is going to help with the clips later. Now, to put on the Tanzite boards, you're going to need to clip it down. So fortunately with the system, we've got clips for pretty much everything. You can drill and screw right through the boards if you need to, but rarely on a deck should you ever have to drill a hole through the Tanzite. With the clip system, you can clip it kind of anywhere you want, including if you need to cut it, you can basically cut it anywhere along these grooves, and you've still got a place for the clip to go. So the clip's going to fit in on the end, but it's also going to fit in on all these spots if you need to rip the board. So it makes it easy to put the clip in. Ultimately, if you do need to cut it exactly where there is no hole, then you can simply cut out the area needed with a grinder, and I'll show you that later. Now, to start off with, you're going to need the edge clips against the house. So your house goes here. Your first board, which is an edge board, is going to go right up against the house. so that you have a finished edge all the way along. So your first board is going to sit inside of that. But you don't really need to line these clips up with anything in particular, so you may as well just go ahead and put them on. So we'll put the first one right here, and since they don't really need to line up with the joist, we're just going to leave it in where it's definitely out of the way. And just screw that in right up next to the house. And then we recommend going and putting one so that you have at least 3 per board or 4 per board in commercial applications. So I'm going to basically just line these up with the joists so that way we get the same spacing as the joists. All right, now putting in the rest of the clips, you've got the edge clips that are holding the edge board down, and then you can use the Tanzite clips to fill in the rest. Now they're plastic, they have these little wings on them, which help keep them in place, allowing you time to get the next board in. So slide them over, basically centered on each joist. They can set there. They also are 3-sided, so while they can catch both boards, they'll also catch this edge board. So set them in so that it's going to catch the end of this board, the end of this next board, and the edge board. Now remember, Tanzite doesn't expand and contract like composite does. So you don't need to leave a big gap here for expansion contraction. You know, you can keep the deck looking nice and clean when you're finished because it's going to stay that size. So it's going to stay however you leave it. So I like to leave a nice tight joint, it just looks better. As you put this board in, you're going to put the next one in. It's going to slide down over all 3. Now when you tighten them down, you're tightening both boards and the edge board. All right, so you can use our fascia clips, which I'll show you later, but the edge clips or starter clips work to mount the stone wherever you want, because you may want to finish the edge of the deck with the edge of the stone, or you may want to finish it here, wherever you want. If it's not on the edge, right here, then you're going to want to use these starter clips. Now to put the starter clips, basically determine where you want that line to be so that you can make yourself a line as to where you want them to sit. So I'm going to put it right like this, make a mark, so that way I can see and line up all these clips to be in a straight row. So then when I put the clip down, I can simply put the clip on the line and they're all going to be on the same line. And when I put the next one on, I simply line it up with that line. Remember, the spacing on these should be every 16 inches minimum, or every 12 inches for commercial applications, or if you're going to see a heavy use on this edge of the deck. Of course, if there's railing here, there's never going to be heavy use against the railing. Now, of course, your edge board is going to have to go on first, because you're going to take this groove and simply line it up and then slide the piece so that it fits into those grooves. Now, if you're using the Tanzite edge clips, the edge clips are going to sit on and hold this groove by attaching to the rim joist. So these can be installed afterwards, so you can first lay out your deck boards if that's more convenient. You can have these tabs sticking out, so as you put the edge board down, it's going to fit into the tab. And now to hold. Alright, so if you need to cut the Tanzite, it's really hard, that's why it's scratch proof, but you can cut it with diamond. So if you need to cut around, say, a gas line or any other kind of protrusion from the wall, you could, obviously you could just measure it, but I'm allergic to measuring. So we're just going to do it by placing the edge board where we need it, placing the board we're going to sit there up against it, and that way we can make our marks off the wall and transfer them directly onto the stone without needing to measure it. Then we can set this up against. And then we can mark it so that we can measure it out. So when you're putting the edge piece on and using the fascia mount clips, the edge piece can actually go on after setting the rest of the boards. So if you have these little tabs sticking out, they're going to catch this back groove. So as you slide the board in, That's going to lock the back groove together. And now this clip is essentially just going to sit right on the edge there and grab it. And you can kind of put it wherever you need to in order to grab the clip. So once you've got it in there, it's got 2 holes. That's just to give you options as to where you want to put the screw. And so I'm going to use the bottom hole, which is what you're most likely to commonly use. And that's going to hold the edge of the clip. When you're laying out the Tanzite deck, the boards are 6 inches, so you can cut your deck length off at any 6-inch length, you know, be it 10 feet, 10 and a half, 11, 11 and a half, so forth. And that way you can have an even board width, so you don't need to cut any of the Tanzites and ripping it down the line. You can end on a full board. However, if you do need to cut, then you probably want to cut this one, in which case it may make it easier to start from the other edge. However, in most cases, it's best to start at the house and work your way out. Now, the boards are 4 feet long, which means you can either line them all up straight and you're going to end up with a line every 4 feet. Or you can offset them to end on every other joist. So as I have it here, the first board you see is 4 feet and it ends on the joist over there. The next board is a foot shorter. It ends center of this joist. Now we're just going to push these clips into place. Remember, these end ones lock the edge board at the same time. So just put these clips in so they hold the next board, and the next board is cut a foot shorter. So this is going to give you another offset on the next one. The next board is only going to be 1 foot. So again, lock this clip into the edge, lock this clip into the edge, and 1 foot. Now you start back over there, and your next board is obviously going to be a full one coming in next to it. That's going to give you a line ending on every joist. Now remember, Tanzite doesn't expand and contract. So you can finish these boards tight together. It doesn't matter. If you're used to composite, then you've probably been told that you need to leave gaps, and so having gaps in the middle of the deck doesn't look right. But if you've ever seen a hardwood floor, the hardwood floor has joints all the way through the floor because it doesn't expand and contract in a house, and your Tanzite isn't going to expand or contract outdoors. As you're laying it out, the boards end on the middle of a joist, so this is going to catch the edge of the next board, but the clip you see will catch all 3 boards. So remember, these clips either are holding 2 or 3 boards with 1 clip. All right, so if you've got a little bit of damage done, you can use one of these touch-up pens, give it a quick shake, and just hit it on your little marks. So it's not going to be perfect, but it at least brings the color back. Now leave it set for about 10 seconds, and then you can hit it with some with a little scrub pad, which will take away the shininess from it. So letting it just slightly dry will allow you to kind of sand the finish off a little bit. Making the marks nearly invisible. All right, so to finish the edge of the deck, you're going to do a nice 45 to clean it up on both sides. Use your edge clip again so that you can match up the 45 degrees. And hold your edge. Now you can put your fascia clips on and away you go. All right, for the Tanzite fascia boards, in order to install them, they get installed using these clips. So you have 2 clips. You have the top clip and bottom clip. So this is a single. It's going to hold the top and bottom of where you start. Then you have the double clip. So this is going to hold 2 at once. So it's going to hold the bottom of the board above it, as well as the top of the board below it. So you're going to install them something like that. Now, when you're putting them in, you just need to make them parallel with the top of the deck. So I've just measured down from the top. And then I like to put a line because these clips really don't need to sit anywhere in particular on the board. You can put them, on the edge. You can bring them in a little ways. And you only need 2 per board. You can have 3. If you're going to build a higher deck, say more than 4 feet, then you might want to go with 3 per board. But otherwise, 2 per board is sufficient. Now, installing them, put your line and then simply put your clip in wherever you're going to need it. Because the clip doesn't need to be anywhere particular, you can simply just put it wherever fits the wood best. So I like to just hold it in place. And then the screws are self-centering. So you essentially want to hold the clip where it goes and then push the screw in center of the hole. Once you've got the screw centered of the hole, you can let go of the clip and screw it in. Which is then going to center the clip onto the wood. And you can adjust it, give it a little tap so that it's vertical. And you only need 1 screw per clip. Now there are different holes. Those are just to give you different options as to where you're going to screw it in. But you only need to use 1 of the holes in order to fasten the clip. Now when you're installing the Tanzite fascia boards, you need to run some studs down below the deck. So I like to hang those right off the rim joist. That way they're supported by the deck and don't really move around since your deck is built secure. When you're doing that, just keep the bottom of the wood off the ground at least a couple of inches so the ground can move around without it affecting the deck structure. So I usually just use a 2x6 or whatever I have on site to hang the boards right off the rim joist. So we're just going to screw those on. Then, to give us a flush surface, we can simply add a 2x4 in front of that. When you're adding this, just keep it to one edge if you're going to add a brace. So if we attach this, now, especially if your deck's more than a couple of feet high, you can add a bracer that simply sits on the side and extends back to an internal joist further into the deck. So to install the Tanzite fascia boards, you need to install these clips. Now you have a single clip that goes at the top and bottom, and you have the double clip that goes in between. These clips just need to sit parallel with the surface of the deck. So I like to just put a line and put the clips kind of anywhere on that line. So if we measure down 32 millimeters or 1.25 inches, and then from there measure another 132 millimeters or 5 3/16 down from this line. So you'd go from this line down 132 or 5 3/16, or measure from the top down and it would just be 6 7/16. So once you have the marks on here, you can simply run your level along it, assuming your deck is level. If not, just make 2 marks so that these lines stay parallel with the deck. That's what's important. And draw a line across to make your 2 marks, and you can just continue that line all the way along every level as you go. And now that gives you a mark as to where to set your clip. So your first one's going to go on top. Remember to center the screw in the hole, since the screws will self-center the clips. All right, so once you've got all your clips, you're going to hang the Tanzite fascia right onto those clips. There's little grooves behind the boards Those grooves are going to correspond to the clips. You only need 2 clips per board. To do the corners, you're going to need to cut them at a 45 so you can have a nice finished corner edge, or you can butt joint them and simply cover it over with a piece of flashing. All right, so when you put them in, because they fit a little loose, you need to put a little bit of PL 400 or some sort of adhesive, and you're just going to put those right on the strip. Once you've got the adhesive on each clip, these, you can just put them face on and fit them right into the groove. Make sure they catch each groove. And then you can slide them into your corner. And then go on with your next one. And continue on down. All right, now when you're placing the Tanzite fascia boards, you can then run them all vertically, which is going to end you with lines that line up. You can also offset them. So, and then when you're installing the board, you can see here, I've got a joint here, my next joint's going to be offset. Now when you're installing them, you can simply glide them onto the clips. So they tuck in behind the top one. Clip each one and continue on down. Now to make a step using the Tanzite, they're 4-foot boards. So one board will make a 4-foot step. They're 6 inches each, so 2 boards makes a 1-foot wide tread. Of course, you can use 3 boards and make it a 1.5-foot tread as well. Simply miter cut the joints like this, so you can have a clean finished edge on all 3 sides.